September 1st, 2019. We're looking at Cocoa Beach, Florida. This is Cocoa Beach Live, or Cocoa Beach Pier Live on YouTube. Go there and subscribe to their channel. They've got a good steady image, but notice the vibration in the camera, guys. That's telling you that pressure, and you can see the swells are rising, the wind's increasing. But you can go there, subscribe to it. The Bahama cams, guys, are down. There's no signal coming, and once we see the satellite images, you may realize why. The people that stayed there, that were stuck there, may be in dire trouble. We've got 185 mile per hour sustained winds over the Elbow Cay area, the first islands, and the very first small island is in the eye right now. So if there's anybody left there, they can see clear sky. But the models, again, have not changed since yesterday, hardly at all, guys, because it's like the storm is taking over its own track. I've talked about this before. Once they get a certain speed and that amount of power, they're less influenced by outside influences. But again, but anywhere between these white lines is what this cone means. Could be the center. So they've averaged it out, and you see it in the M's, which means major hurricanes, up until it gets into the central area of South Carolina, right offshore there, if this track holds up. But they change up until the last minute. We know that from the hurricanes that we've lived through. Now this is the latest models. Again, not much change since yesterday afternoon. They're kind of laying back and looking at this thing and saying, wow, what is going on? And in the video before this, remember I talked about these solar winds, and now we've had a 6.7 quake because of that, and we've had a 5.0 earthquake up in Alaska that people are feeling down into the northeast. Now adding the earlier models, that was when we were seeing some of these tracks going to the Gulf of Mexico itself. But guys, look at the eye is right over that tiny blue dot that's one of the outer islands of the Bahamas. It's right in that Elbow Cay area. So if there's anybody there that can still see, then they're looking at clear skies right above them. But right to the edge of that, imagine 185 mile per hour sustained winds. It's worse than a buzzsaw. Now looking at infrared images, same thing, perfectly formed eye wall. And you guys remember Matthew from about 3 years ago? Remember that image that looked like a skull? That's it right there. And it was powerful, but it was nowhere the power of the storm. Katrina and Ivan are not even in the top 10 compared to this storm. Only one has tied it for maximum sustained winds at 185, and that was a great hurricane of 1935 that almost destroyed the Florida Keys. Remember the railroad damage and some of the monuments that are out there? They're amazing, and they had no warning of the storm. There was workers and stuff. If you look at the Keys, there was railroad tracks going across bridges, kind of jumping some of these islands. And that storm came down and went through the Keys and came up into the Gulf of Mexico. Thousands were killed, devastated the area. And that's the only thing that Dorian is, or the only thing that's close to Dorian. They're both tied right now at 185 mile per hour winds. And we'll look at that chart. But guys, we don't know where it's going to go. Again, they have kind of frozen the models. But this is the strongest landfalling Atlantic hurricanes on the record. At the top was the Labor Day 1935 hurricane, guys, that swept through the Keys. 185 was the miles per hour. Dorian, see that right below it now, is tied at that. If it goes up, it will be the strongest landfalling Atlantic hurricane on record. Notice Ivan, Katrina are not in there. Camille is way down below Irma. Janet, you got David, Gilbert. Well, imagine that one, man. And so Katrina is not on the list. Ivan is not on this list, and we know that devastation. Been through those. So guys, this is nothing to play with at all. And we were looking, my wife and I were looking at the different categories of a hurricane, And your Cat 1s go from 74 to 95 miles an hour, which is a 21 mile per hour jump. Then a Cat 2 from 96 to 110 gives you a 15 mile an hour jump. Cat 3 to Cat 4 gives you a 19 mile an hour jump from 111 to 129. Then a Cat 4 at 130 to 156 gives you a 26 mile per hour jump in the intensities. Now, so Cat 5 is listed as a 157 mile per hour hurricane or stronger. Well, at 185, which we have now, that's the largest jump at 28 miles per hour. So, I don't know when they will ever put in a Cat 6, but it's right now the largest jump in scale. And they're not a linear scale, because Cat 1's 20 mile an hour jump, but going from a Cat 2 to a Cat 3 is just a 15 mile per hour jump. So it's a non-linear, but guys, this is going to be powerful. There's nothing to play with, and what you're looking at now is not Dorian, it's Katrina. Look at the perfectly formed eye wall. But again, it's not even on the list of the top 10. Do not play with the storm. I have a bad feeling about what's happened in the Bahamas. If you got any reports, come in to the comments and let us know. I've seen some of the large ships, the passenger and the cruise ships that are anchored in these islands. I mean, they're really strapped down. Just a few days ago, looking at some of the harbor webcams. And so the passengers, I don't know if they'd be safer there on that ship than they would in a hurricane. It'd be a hard thing to say. I think I'd take the ship. But you're going to have strong storm surge. The next video I do, we're going to talk about the latest updates on storm surge impacts. Remember, in the Miami area, we're going into the king tide, which is one of the largest of the year. I think this would be the second largest. And you've got the solar wind stream now peaking out today, so that's putting heat on top of all the storms and everywhere else on the planet. So it's a perfect storm, like we talked about earlier. But again, some of the major storms we've had lately, guys, are not on the list compared to Dorian. If it gets to 186, it will be the strongest. It's a heads up, guys. Be safe.